Laura Thompson stood still, her breath fogging the glass window of the maternity ward. Behind it, warm fluorescent lights bathed the room in a quiet glow, cradling rows of newborns bundled in pastel blankets. Each tiny rise and fall of their chests was a whisper of new life. Mothers beamed through exhaustion, fathers hovered protectively, grandparents wept with joy. But Laura? She simply watched. Her hands, cold and trembling, clutched the tray of postnatal supplements she was supposed to be delivering. She'd paused, again. For the third time that week. One of the nurses inside, her friend Yemi, caught her eye through the glass and gave a quick wave. Laura forced a smile, lifted the tray slightly, then looked away. It was just 5 steps through the doors. 5 steps to deliver medicine, 5 steps to pretend she wasn't dying inside. "Laura, you good?" A voice startled her. She turned to see Dr. Ben, the senior resident, walking toward her with his stethoscope looped casually around his neck. His expression softened as he caught the tightness in her eyes. "I'm fine," she replied, quickly composing herself. "Just, got a bit distracted." Ben nodded slowly. He was kind, too kind. And she hated that kindness sometimes. Because it saw too much. "Take a minute. I'll cover the rounds," he said gently. "You've been working non-stop. Go breathe." She nodded, grateful and guilty in the same breath. Outside, the Lagos evening was dipping into golden hour. The city hummed, soft car horns, the buzz of okadas zipping through hospital gates, gospel music faintly drifting from a nearby ward radio. Laura sat beneath the jacaranda tree outside the emergency wing, her back against the peeling trunk, letting the sun warm her face. In her bag was a prescription she hadn't filled. Not for a patient, for herself. Clomid. Again. This would be her 4th cycle. 4th. She had stopped telling people. Even Daniel, her husband, didn't know about this round. She couldn't bear the way his face fell every time the test came back negative. Their marriage hadn't always been like this. 5 years ago, they were that couple, prayerful, passionate, deeply in love. They'd met in university during a campus fellowship meeting, where she led worship and he gave a testimony about being delivered from a rough past. His words, his smile, his transparency, they disarmed her. Now. They barely touched. They spoke in syllables, groceries, bills, church. Sometimes they prayed together, but mostly, they prayed alone. And lately, even that felt empty. Later that night, Laura arrived home to the sound of the television humming low and the smell of jollof rice she didn't cook. Daniel was in the kitchen, dishing out 2 plates. "I figured you'd be tired," he said without looking up. "Thanks," she murmured, setting her bag down. They sat, ate in silence. The food was good, spicy, rich, exactly how she liked it. He was trying. She was too. But the wait between them was louder than any conversation. Halfway through the meal, Daniel cleared his throat. "I got us an appointment. Another specialist. This one in Acadia." Laura froze. "When?" she asked. "Next week. Wednesday." She nodded. But her heart clenched. Because that would mean more scans. More questions. More, "just relax and trust God," comments from well-meaning doctors. She excused herself early and slipped into the bathroom. The test was still in her bag. Still unopened. What if it was positive this time? What if it wasn't? And as she sat on the edge of the bathtub, tears spilling before she could stop them, Laura whispered a prayer. Not one of power or bold faith. Just one word, why? The silence in their living room was thick, not the comfortable kind, but the kind that curled into the corners and clung to the walls. Laura sat on the edge of the couch, still in her scrubs, shoes off, her feet tucked beneath her like a child needing safety. In her lap sat the truth, a slim white stick with a single line. Negative. Again. She didn't cry right away. Instead, she stared at it. Not in disbelief, that was long gone, but in quiet, exhausted expectation. As if a part of her had already known, and the other part was just waiting for her body to catch up. Daniel entered the room, his footsteps soft, hesitant. He paused when he saw her. She didn't look up. "Lara," he said, his voice almost a whisper. She didn't answer. He came closer and knelt in front of her. His hands reached for hers slowly, gently, as though afraid they might break. She let him take them. Her hands were cold. His were warm. Always warm. She finally looked at him. "I wanted to tell you earlier," she said, her voice cracking. "But I didn't want to disappoint you again." His brow furrowed. "Disappoint me?" She nodded, tears filling her eyes now. "I feel like I've failed. Like I'm less. And every time I see that line, I hear the same thing over and over in my head, you're not enough." Daniel's eyes welled up too. "Lara, no. No. Don't do that to yourself." He reached up and touched her cheek, brushing away a tear with his thumb. "You are not a failure. You are not broken. You are my wife. The same woman who held me when I lost my job. The woman who sang over me when I was sick. The woman who prays even when she's hurting." She broke then. A sob escaped her lips and she folded forward into his arms. He held her tightly, rocking her slowly, like a man holding something sacred. Because he was. "It hurts so much," she said against his shoulder. "I know," he replied, voice trembling. "But I'd rather go through this with you than have any other life without you." They stayed like that for what felt like forever, the kind of silence that heals, not wounds. The kind where love doesn't need words. Later that night, Lara sat with her head on his lap as he gently stroked her hair. On the coffee table in front of them was the open Bible, turned to Psalm 34. "The Lord is close to the broken-hearted," Daniel read aloud, his voice soft, deep, sure. "And saves those who are crushed in spirit." Lara reached for his hand and squeezed. "Do you still believe?" she asked. He looked down at her, his eyes glassy. "Even when I don't feel him. I believe he's still here. I believe he gave me you." She blinked up at him, her heart cracking open again, but this time, not from grief. From love. "Then I can keep going," she whispered. The fertility clinic in Acadia was quiet, unnervingly so. There was no soft gospel music playing, no idle chatter, no children running around. Just the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the clicking of a receptionist's keyboard. Lara sat with both hands clenched tightly in her lap. Daniel's hand rested over hers, steady and firm, grounding her as she bounced her leg with every minute that passed. She'd always hated waiting rooms. They smelled like sterile air and promises yet to be broken. On the far wall, a cross hung above a small shelf of magazines. It was the only reminder in the room that faith still had a place in all this science. The door to the inner office opened. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," a soft voice called. They both stood. Daniel gave her a quick glance. "You ready?" And she nodded. Barely. Dr. Olatunji was nothing like Lara had imagined. She wasn't stiff or overly clinical. She wore a cheerful yellow blouse beneath her white coat, and her braided hair was pinned neatly behind her head. Her voice was calm, her presence warm. She smiled as they entered. "Please, sit." Lara didn't let go of Daniel's hand as they sat opposite the desk. "I've gone over both your files," the doctor began, tapping a few keys to bring up a chart on her laptop. "And I want to first say, thank you for being here. This journey is not easy." Lara's throat tightened. Daniel gave a small nod. "Your test results show that you both are relatively healthy," Dr. Olatunji said. "There are a few minor hormone imbalances, Lara, but nothing that can't be addressed." What we're looking at is what's called unexplained infertility. So, nothing is wrong, Daniel said slowly, but we still can't conceive. Sometimes, the doctor said gently, the body simply doesn't cooperate, even when everything looks right on paper. But there are treatments we can try. IUI. IVF. It's a matter of what you're both emotionally and financially ready to explore. Lara's heart sank. The words sounded distant, like floating above water, hearing someone speak from below. IUI. IVF. They'd heard them before. But this time, they weren't just options. They were decisions. Daniel spoke softly, what's our best chance? The doctor hesitated, but her tone remained kind. With your profile, IVF offers the highest success rate. But it can be physically and emotionally demanding. It will test both of you. And I always ask couples, not just, can your bodies take it, but can your hearts? Lara looked at Daniel. For once, he didn't have answers. Just the same fear she felt in her own chest. Back in the car, they sat in silence. The street outside was alive with Lagos life, vendors shouting, horns blaring, kids weaving between Kiki Napeps. But in their car, it felt like time had paused. Do we have the strength for this? Lara whispered. Daniel looked at her. We have each other. That's our strength. The church office smelled faintly of sandalwood and old books. A small wall fan hummed steadily near the window, stirring the lace curtain every few seconds like a quiet breath. A wooden cross hung above the door, polished smooth with age. Beside it, a photo of the church's first foundation laying, 1987, faded and curling at the corners. Lara sat on the edge of the sofa, a folded tissue in her hand, her eyes red and swollen. Daniel sat close, his hand resting gently on her back. He didn't speak, not yet. He knew her silence was still speaking volumes. Across from them sat Pastor Samuel and Mama Esther, the kind of couple whose presence could calm even the fiercest storms. Pastor Samuel's white hair framed his face like a crown of quiet wisdom. His wife's eyes were soft, gentle, always watching. You are not alone in this, Pastor Samuel said, breaking the silence. Lara shook her head slowly, voice trembling. It feels like we are. Everyone else is moving forward. Friends having babies, naming ceremonies, we just keep waiting. Mama Esther leaned forward. Waiting is not absence. Sometimes, it's preparation. Lara let out a breath that was more pain than air. We tried IVF, Daniel said, his voice low. The first round. It failed. Pastor Samuel nodded slowly. He didn't rush to respond. He simply let the weight of the words settle, honoring them. Sometimes, he said, God does not move mountains the way we expect. He moves us instead. He stretches us, shapes us, prepares us to hold what we've asked for, or to carry something entirely different. But what if what we're asking for never comes? Lara asked, voice cracking. What if he says no? Mama Esther reached across the space and took Lara's hand gently in hers. Then we learned that love is not less because it was never born in the womb. The room was silent. It can be born in sacrifice. In prayer. In staying together even when grief tries to separate you, she continued. Some of the deepest loves are the ones formed in the fire. Daniel reached for Lara's hand. This time, she didn't resist. We're tired, he admitted. But we're still here. Still holding on. To each other. To God. Even if we don't understand him right now. Pastor Samuel smiled, not a cheerful smile, but one of deep, knowing joy. That is faith. Not absence of doubt, but presence in pain. Before they left, Mama Esther pulled a worn Bible from her lap and handed it to Lara. Open to Psalm 126. Read it together tonight. Let it become a promise again. Lara held the Bible close, like Something precious. Later that night, at home, they curled up on the couch. Lara opened to the psalm. "Those who sow in tears," she read aloud, her voice soft, breaking. "Shall reap in joy," Daniel finished. And for the first time in a long time, they believed it might be true. The sky had barely begun to lighten when Lara stepped onto the sand. The ocean stretched before her, endless and calm, a mirror of the heaven above. The rhythmic hush of waves touching shore was the only sound, no horns, no phones, no nurses calling her name. Just peace. She slipped off her sandals, letting her bare feet sink into the cool sand. The hem of her white dress fluttered gently in the sea breeze. She hadn't told Daniel she was coming here. He was still asleep when she crept out. She needed this moment to herself, to break, to breathe, to pray. But mostly, to listen. When she reached the water's edge, she stopped. Tears came again, unannounced, not heavy sobs like before, but soft, almost graceful. Like the ocean was pulling them out of her, wave by wave. She tilted her head back and whispered, "God. I don't even know what to ask for anymore." The wind wrapped around her like an answer. "If not a child, then give me peace. If not a miracle, then give me strength. But please, don't be silent." She closed her eyes, breathed deep. And then, something shifted. Not outside. But in her. She wasn't healed. She wasn't whole. But she felt, held. Held by something greater than her fear, something deeper than her desire. By the time the sun fully rose, Lara was seated on a rock, her knees drawn to her chest, her arms wrapped around them. She watched as two children chased each other across the sand nearby, their laughter piercing the stillness. She didn't look away. She smiled. And for the first time in months, it wasn't painful. Back home, Daniel was waiting. A Bible lay open on the kitchen table, and 2 mugs of tea steamed quietly beside it. "I figured you needed some space," he said when she walked in. She nodded. Walked to him. Rested her head against his chest. "I didn't find answers," she whispered. "That's okay," he replied. "Sometimes we don't need answers. Just peace to keep going." She pulled back and looked up at him. "I think I'm ready." "Ready for what?" "Whatever comes next. Whether it's another round, or something else." Daniel reached for her hand. "Then we'll do it together. One prayer at a time." It was barely 6 a.m. The Lagos sun was still deciding whether to rise, casting a soft, golden haze through the frosted bathroom window. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, the city slowly waking. Lara stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, her hands trembling around the small stick in her grasp. She hadn't meant to take it. Not yet. She was supposed to wait until the end of the week. That's what the doctor said. That's what Daniel reminded her gently every night. But her body felt different this time. Not dramatically. Not clearly. Just different. And she couldn't bear another day of not knowing. She stared at the test, heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. 1 line meant nothing changed. 2 lines meant. Her knees went weak. 2 lines. Faint, but there. She stared, blinked. Shook the test like it might be lying. It didn't change. Tears filled her eyes. But she didn't smile. Not yet. She had seen false hope before. Felt it curl around her like a warm blanket only to vanish in a cold wave of blood and grief. She glanced at herself in the mirror. Her reflection was unfamiliar, eyes wide, lips parted in a stunned gasp, tears streaking down her cheeks. "God," she whispered. It wasn't a declaration. It was a plea. A cry. A gasp of breathless disbelief. She didn't wake Daniel. Instead, she tiptoed into the living room, dropped to her knees on the rug, and laid the test on the floor in front of her. Her hands trembled as she clasped them in prayer. If this is real, please let it stay. Please let it grow. Please, let this be the one. She wept there, not from pain, but from the sheer weight of daring to hope again. Daniel found her like that 20 minutes later. He rubbed his eyes, confused at first, until he saw the test beside her. He dropped to his knees in front of her. She couldn't speak. She only nodded. His eyes widened. Are you sure? It's faint, but it's there, she whispered. He didn't shout. He didn't jump. He just pulled her into his arms and held her like she might disappear. They didn't celebrate that day. Not yet. They moved carefully, spoke gently, touched reverently. Like a fragile prayer they weren't ready to say aloud. But somewhere in Lara's chest, a new hope fluttered, tiny, cautious, sacred. The clinic was quiet, save for the soft hum of machines and the occasional shuffle of nurses' shoes across polished tiles. Lara sat on the edge of the examination bed, one hand resting protectively over her belly. Her other hand gripped Daniel's tightly, their fingers intertwined like a lifeline. Dr. Olatunji entered with a warm smile and a clipboard in hand. Her white coat fluttered slightly as she crossed the room. Good morning, Lara. Daniel. Her voice was soft, respectful of the moment. Lara couldn't speak. She only nodded. How are you feeling? The doctor asked gently. Nervous, Lara whispered. And, trying not to hope too much. It's okay to hope, the doctor replied. Hope is how miracles begin. She pulled on her gloves, then turned on the ultrasound machine. The room dimmed slightly as the screen flickered to life. Daniel moved closer, his other hand now brushing gently across Lara's hair. She closed her eyes as the cold gel was applied to her belly. Her breathing quickened. She didn't want to look. Not yet. And then. A flicker. The tiniest flutter on the screen. Rapid. Consistent. Alive. Dr. Olatunji's smile grew. There it is. Lara's eyes flew open. She stared at the screen, mouth slightly parted. There, in that black and white window of her womb, was the tiniest form. Barely a bean. But unmistakably, a life. That's your baby, the doctor said softly. Lara gasped. Daniel sank slowly to his knees beside the bed, resting his head on her arm. Tears spilled freely from his eyes, silent and overwhelming. It's real, she whispered. It's really happening. The doctor turned up the sound. The room filled with it, a fast, steady heartbeat. Like a drumline of heaven. The rhythm of answered prayers. Lara couldn't breathe for a moment. Not out of fear, but from the weight of pure joy. For the first time in years, the waiting had a sound. A heartbeat. And in that heartbeat was everything, the aroma of fried plantain, jollof rice, and grilled fish filled the air like a celebration waiting to happen. The living room was alive with movement, chairs being shifted, dishes passed, hands clapping in rhythm to the faint Afrobeat music humming from a small speaker in the corner. Lara stood at the center, heart pounding not from fear, but from anticipation. Beside her, Daniel's hand rested gently on her shoulder. His smile was quiet, proud, and brimming with emotion. He gave her a small nod. She exhaled. We have something to share, she said, voice rising just enough to still the room. Her mother, seated with her Bible in her lap, looked up first. So did her father, and Daniel's younger sister, who paused mid-laughter, holding a spoonful of rice. Lara took Daniel's hand and placed it over her belly. For a moment, silence. And then, a gasp. Are you serious? Her sister cried. Pregnant, her mother whispered, eyes already misting over. Lara? Daniel grinned now, nodding. We heard the heartbeat last week. The room erupted. Aunties clapped their hands, ululated in joy, already talking about names and baby clothes. Daniel's father stood and embraced him tightly. Lara's mother rose slowly, tears streaming freely down her cheeks, and walked straight to her daughter. She wrapped her arms around Lara, whispering, "God remembered you. He remembered you, my child." Lara sobbed into her shoulder, not from sadness, but from the relief of being seen, of being celebrated, of finally being free to rejoice. That night, long after the guests had gone and the dishes had been cleared, Lara and Daniel lay on the couch wrapped in a blanket, her head resting on his chest. "Do you think it's okay to be happy now?" she whispered. Daniel pecked her forehead gently. "It's not just okay," he said. "It's holy." It was just past 3 a.m. when Lara's cry pierced the sterile silence of the delivery room. Her face was drenched in sweat, her body trembling with exhaustion. The nurse's voice was steady but urgent. The doctor moved with calm precision. "One more push, Lara. Just one more." She clenched her teeth, looked to the right, where Daniel knelt beside her, his hands gripping hers with desperate faith. His eyes were red from crying, from praying, from witnessing a miracle. She pushed. And then, it happened. A sharp cry filled the room. Tiny. Fierce. Whole. Lara's body collapsed backward as a gasp left her lips. Tears streamed from her eyes, unstoppable now, as she watched the nurse lift a small, perfect baby girl into the air. "You have a daughter," the doctor whispered, smiling as she placed the child in Lara's arms. Lara looked down. Tiny hands. Soft curls. Eyes closed. A face so beautiful it stole the breath from her lungs. She laughed, the kind of laugh only grief survivors know. A laugh soaked in tears. Daniel placed his forehead against hers. "She's here," he whispered. "She's ours." They didn't say much after that. They just held her. And each other. Later, as dawn broke over Lagos and golden light spilled through the window, Lara traced her finger gently across the baby's forehead. "Do you want to name her?" she asked. Daniel nodded, tears returning. "Her name is Iridi." "Hope." Lara smiled. "Hope," she echoed. "Yes. That's who she is." That morning, a soft knock came at the door. A nurse entered with a bouquet and a letter. Lara opened it, eyes widening at the signature. "Mama Esther." Inside, in her looping handwriting, were just 3 lines. "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. You have reaped, my dear ones. And joy has a name." Outside the hospital window, the world continued, cars honking, vendors shouting, life buzzing forward. But inside that quiet room, everything had changed. And as Lara looked down at Iridi, held close in her arms, her heart whispered, "Thank you, God, for never letting go." The sun dipped low behind the neem trees, casting long golden shadows across the front porch of a small home on the edge of town. Birds fluttered through hibiscus shrubs, and a breeze stirred the drying baby clothes hung neatly on a line. Lara sat on a wicker bench, her arms cradling little Iridi, who was now nearly 6 months old, all wide eyes, soft curls, and a laugh that made the world stop spinning. Daniel sat beside them, one arm wrapped around Lara's shoulders, the other tracing lazy circles on Iridi's back. They didn't speak much anymore about the years that came before. Not because they had forgotten, but because the pain no longer defined them. It had been absorbed, transformed. Now it lived in a deeper place, the soil where their joy had finally bloomed. Sometimes Lara still woke up at night, just to check if Iridi was breathing. Just to listen to the small, sacred sound of her daughter's sleep. And sometimes Daniel would rise before dawn and sit at the kitchen table with a journal, writing quiet prayers in ink-stained pages. They hadn't stopped needing God. They'd just learned he was never absent, even in the silence. On this particular evening, Lara looked down at Iridi, who had just discovered the joy of clapping her tiny hands. She giggled loudly, proud of her new skill. Daniel laughed, not the weary laugh of waiting, but the full, hearty laugh of a man who had seen a promise kept. Lara smiled. "Do you remember the verse Mama Esther gave us?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy," Lara finished. She leaned into him, their daughter between them, glowing in the last light of day. And for the first time in a long time, Lara laughed again, not from disbelief, not from sorrow, but from the deep, holy peace of knowing that God had remembered them. And this time, joy had a name.